All right.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. So welcome to, I'm not sure what session this is, but other than, thank you, Dave, fifth session, other than Donna's orientation, this is going to be the best 7 or 8 hours that you spend today. So we're going to do a quick review of what got us here. So if you go back to the very beginning, a few questions that we answered. Are leaders born or developed? Anybody remember? I'm waiting on Amy to get some answers over there. That's correct. Leaders are developed. You might be born with certain traits that can tend to be a better leader, but leaders are developed. We talked about what or who do you think of when you think of leadership or great leaders. We talked about the 4 skills to be an effective leader, which is vision, articulation, persuasion, and initiative. And we illustrated initiative with the Dog Poop Initiative book. We discussed how leaders solve upstream problems to get to the root cause as opposed to putting out fires all the time. We then reviewed the 5 habits and ethics of moral excellence in leadership, which are candor, commitment, contentment, consistency, and courage. And Joel expanded on courage at the last session. We discussed how leaders are required to do hard and important things. I don't know if you remember, we kind of answered the question, how do you know if it's an important thing to do? That's right. To the level that you don't want to do something probably tells you that it's pretty important. I can relate to that. I can relate to that feeling. At the last session, we discussed what I'm going to call the priority quadrants and where leaders should spend most of their time. Let's see if I can get this to work. So if you remember that was items that are important and urgent, or not important and urgent, important and not urgent, and then not important and not urgent. So real leaders, effective leaders, really should spend hopefully the most of their time on items that are important, but maybe not necessarily urgent. That first block of important and urgent are often the fires that we're putting out. But if we're prepared and we're leading properly, we're not going to have to spend as much time in that urgent and important section and doing more things that are long-term planning, like the important and not urgent. And we want to really limit that quadrant number 4, where we're a lot of distractions, entertainment, social media, organizing old records, those type of things that we really don't want to spend any leadership time in those areas that we can think of more than we need to. So how are effective, virtuous leaders successful? We kind of touched on this, I guess it's now been 4 or 5 weeks ago, the last session that I covered. One conversation or interaction at a time, and by following the GSM leadership principles. So what I'm going to spend the bulk of the time, the next 20, 25 minutes going through, hopefully, is something that I developed, it's been several years ago. I just used the acronym or the word leadership and developed what I thought was an acronym based on that, with a couple of words and leadership principles based on each letter of the word leadership. Pretty simple, but I think something that can be pretty powerful if we were able to follow these. So we're going to continue talking about these traits and effective, how to be effective as a virtuous leader following these principles. So GSM leadership. First, it might be the most important, is listening. All right, listening. I know many of, I know a lot of the residential team has heard me say this many times. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I think God wants us to listen twice as much as we talk. And I think good leaders, that's a good standard to keep. We should use them in correct proportion. Active listening means basically, and this is a hard concept, listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond. I know early in my professional career especially, I could not wait for somebody to be quiet so I could show them how smart I was, especially when I was out on sales calls. I spent a lot of time not listening because I wanted to respond. So active listening and really having respect for the person that you're dealing with or talking to requires active listening, which again, that concept is listen to understand as opposed to listening to respond. So next time you're having an interaction with someone or a conversation with someone, think about that scenario. Are you really listening and taking in the information that they're saying, or are you just waiting for them to be quiet so you can respond to something that was said early in the conversation? We miss so much when we're interacting with others because we hear something early in the conversation and then we want to respond to that and we miss the rest of the conversation. Second is learn. Learn. Leaders are learners. I think originally when I wrote this, I said leaders are readers. Well, I do believe that. I think real leaders are learners, though, because there's so many different ways you can learn now. I know this was kind of touched on one of the earlier sessions, but if you're not learning, you don't have enough humility to understand that you don't know everything, then you might have some issues. It's also a tough one because, and misunderstood because I think a lot of people just don't like to read, don't like to learn, don't like to take the time that's required to learn a new skill, learn what's the latest in leadership, what's the latest in your area of responsibility here at the company, or learn how to be better at relationships, or whatever the case may be. But I can assure you, you go to probably the greatest learning resource now is probably YouTube. Google is okay, but I actually prefer YouTube. I'm more of a video or visual learner than I am an auditory learner. However, I read all the time. So good, effective leaders are always learning something new and always aspiring to learn as much as they can. Another L is love. Now, the type of love I'm talking about here is genuinely caring about those that you interact with, especially if you're in a position of leadership and you have individuals that report to you or that you're responsible for. You have to genuinely care about their well-being and the circumstances of their teams and the team members. So if you're not concerned about what they're learning, giving them the tools they need to be successful, removing the obstacles that are there, ultimately that's one of the primary jobs as a leader is removing obstacles so your team can be successful. It's got to be, I think I said this several, maybe it might have been the very first session, but it's not about you if you're the leader. It's not about you, it's about your team and about the success of the team and the success of the organization. If you're truly in a position of leadership, you'll be recognized by the success of the team and the organization. But you have to do that by helping your team members and the individual team members in the team be successful. All right, letter E is enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. Leaders have real energy and enthusiasm for what they are doing each day. They jump out of bed, spring out of bed like it's going to be the most exciting day ever in the history of the world, and they bring energy and enthusiasm to everything they're doing. Right? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the room of 6 people here just exploded in the training room. They understand the why, and they carry the company and organizational flag and are proud of what they accomplish each day and how the organization serves its customers and its team members. They genuinely carry the flag of the organization and the company and the team proudly every single day, and they do it with energy and enthusiasm. That is something that teams, customers, co-workers can sniff it out. You will be sniffed out if you don't have enthusiasm for what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish every day. It'd be nice if that wasn't the case, if you could just sneak around and not get called out, but listen, your team is going to sniff that out if you don't have real enthusiasm for what you're doing. Exceed expectations. If you've been here long enough at GSM, you have heard this before. It's one of our core values, is to exceed customers' expectations, and that's both internal and external customers. So if you're a leader, you have team members who are also your customers, not just the external customers that we serve every day. So leaders work to go above and beyond, under promise and over deliver, and try to create wow experiences. Under promise and over deliver is a great concept, especially in the type of work that we do. Contractors historically over promise and under deliver. I mean, it's an interesting concept. But if you under promise something, then over deliver on that, that is exactly how we create raving fans, and we create raving coworkers. But when the opposite occurs, it can be pretty devastating. Absolutely. And wow experiences, and that's ultimately our goal. When in all of our interactions, to create wow experiences, that doesn't matter whether it's a coworker, a customer, or the community. We are working, a good leader is working to exceed expectations. A in leadership, attitude. Again, also one of our core values, having a positive attitude. Negative attitudes will not help us move forward or help anyone reach goals. Daily attitude is a personal decision. I can assure you, when I was younger, I had no concept of what this meant, and I sure didn't act it out on a daily basis. I allowed external situation, external circumstances, whatever was going on, to negatively affect how I reacted to it. And I tell you what, the last 12 months have given us plenty of reasons to not get out of bed every day with a positive attitude. But ultimately, as a leader, what determines what we accomplish and how our level of leadership is how we react to situations, and how we deal with those situations is the ultimate gauge of what type of leader we are. So, one of the goals is always to have a positive attitude. Now, I don't think the expectation is every single day, every single minute, everybody's going to run around with some bubbly Disney, I'm not sure what the word I'm trying to come up with, but yeah, except unless you're Elizabeth or Donna. So it should, but we still have the reality of everyday life is something that we still have to deal with, but it's more of a general overall outlook and attitude that we have toward the work we do and toward our interactions with others. Another A that comes off of our core value list is accountability. We've hit this a number of times since we started this a couple of months ago, and I do believe that it is something that I personally feel we need to continue to work on here at GSM. So leaders hold themselves and others accountable to the core values and standards of the culture and vision. So I'm specifically obviously talking about GSM, but that's just in general. Effective leaders hold others accountable to the core values and standards. Leadership teams hold each other accountable. I did use a phrase in here, hold themselves accountable. I think there are exceptions to this, but it's very difficult to hold yourself accountable. You need a leadership group. You need people around you that understand what your personal core values are, what the organization is that you happen to be involved with, whether it's a company, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's, doesn't really matter, whether it's a church, but there has to be people around that are going to help hold the standards and core values up to the culture and vision that is expected. That's a tough one. So think about it next time you're dealing with on a job site, you're dealing with a customer. Take a look around. Watch what your coworkers are doing. Watch what other companies are doing. And how can we better hold each other accountable up to our core values and the standards that we're trying to uphold. Next in leadership is D, dedication. Dedication. I think one issue with dedication is that can be kind of a subjective word. Dedication can mean so many different things to so many different people. And what the level of dedication that's required to be an effective leader. So the way we've defined it here is work daily to the core values, standards, and guidelines, GSM WOW experience initiatives. So the daily question is this activity or whatever I happen to be doing helping move myself, my team members in a division forward toward the division or away from it? If not, if it's not moving you forward toward a clear vision, it might not be the right action or activity. So you got to be dedicated to the daily activities and behaviors that are required to move your team forward. A phrase that we've used over the past couple of months is moving your team or group toward an advantage, whatever that advantage might be. And it should be whatever vision we have created for, for the future and what we're trying to accomplish on a daily basis. So asking this anytime you're about to do something to make a decision, that's a great question to ask. Is this what I'm getting ready to do? Is it going to help improve the company, improve the team, improve the community, improve myself? Again, if the answer is not a yes, we need to evaluate that decision and what we're doing. The next D is discipline. There's a great guy I follow, and we're going to go through one of his books later in the year. A guy named Jocko Willink, who was a former Navy SEAL, and he does a lot of leadership, has a great podcast. But one of his big things is discipline equals freedom. Discipline, especially personal discipline, is hard. I mean, just think about, I don't know, the most common thing that comes to mind is food and exercise. Being disciplined to eat what we're supposed to eat healthier, and exercise consistently. Why is that so hard? If it was easy, everybody would do it properly every day, all the time. Never have to discuss it. So discipline, we must stay on the path and be consistent with our standards, actions, focus, results, core values, culture, behaviors, interactions, etc. That list could go on and on and on. But discipline is hard. But I do believe, I like that phrase that Jocko uses called discipline equals freedom. In fact, he's got a whole book on it. But it's so easy to fall down on the discipline and keep us focused on the things that we're supposed to do daily to get the results that we're really looking for. So the D's are dedication and discipline. All right, the second E, educate. Educate learning. Effective leaders are always coaching and developing team members and asking questions. If you're a leader, my experience is that asking questions of your team is one of the best ways to help educate them instead of telling. Early in my career, I had the really bad habit of just telling the teams and our coworkers what to do. Think about, I don't know if everybody out here has children, think about how you treat your children. I really know early on, boy, I really just told my kids over and over again what to do. And, for some reason it didn't work. When you ask questions, though, frame those things in form of question, such as, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should solve this problem? Instead of telling them what to do, that's how you help pass on the knowledge, and they'll remember that more so than if they're just being told what to do. So asking questions is one of the better ways to coach and develop team members. But a good leader is always working to educate their teams. Empathy, or being empathetic. Two of the biggest, I think, traits and behaviors for effective leaders is humility and empathy. Now, I talked about this, I think in the very first session. And yes, some of these are being repeated on purpose. But empathy, the short, simple definition is putting yourself in the shoes of the team. Having the ability to look at a situation from someone else's perspective and accept that for what it is, and not projecting your beliefs automatically onto someone else. So if you're in a position of leadership and you're leading a team, and you, as an example, you came up to the company or any organization, and now you're leading a group where in a job where you used to do the work, one thing to remember is they may never do it as well as you, and they may not care as much as you do. That's a tough leadership lesson, a tough concept. Took me a long time to understand that. But when you're in a position of leadership, there's a reason you're in a position of leadership. It's because you do care, and you do have, and you may have gotten so good at what you're doing that you've been promoted, or you've moved up into a bigger and better situation. So showing empathy, though, is understanding that their intent is almost always to do a good job and do the right thing. Understanding their intent is part of empathy, and understanding that their intent is always good. I believe here at GSM that 99.9% of the time, the intent of our team members is always good. But again, if you have a team member who may not do as good a job as you think they should have, or they've made the same mistake more than once, that can be a hard concept as a leader to grasp and understand how to deal with that. So empathy and humility, and we'll get to humility later on, but empathy is if I could encourage you as a leader to get better at one behavior or study one trait, that is probably the first one I would put on the list, is how to be more empathetic for not just people that you might lead, but everyone around you will give you a better perspective. In fact, that's one of the reasons I personally think we have so much political discord in the country, is a lack of empathy for different views and different perspectives. So I think I'm actually going to, we're almost getting to 5 o'clock. I'm going to get to a stopping point here. I went through half of leadership, so the next time I'll go through the second half of the word leadership with some more discussion. I've got one item I want to share, then I'll have, we'll send it out to the entire group. I'll try to share some type of resource at each session. So what I'm going to send out, don't worry about writing this down. I'm going to get this list sent out. As I said, I'm a big reader, so I put together a recommended book list for a couple different topics: business, leadership, personal development, customer service, and customer experience. Most of these books we actually have here in our library, or if we don't have it in the library, I have it. I have a copy of this. So these books are accessible without having to go out and buy them. If you're willing to come and come up here to the CCC and check out a copy of some of these books. Again, let me be clear, you don't need to copy this down. I'll make sure we send this out to the entire group, this list. There's also plenty of audio apps or ways to get most of these books on audio. Also, if you would prefer to listen to them as opposed to reading them. But again, I'm going to encourage everybody to always be reading something, whether it's really, and I'm not talking about something that's necessarily going to be related to GSM, but it could just be something for your own personal development. But all of it's going to be a good way to better yourself, and reading is just a good habit to develop for that. So that's actually all I've got today. I'm going to finish up early, but a little longer than Joel normally goes. So I want to keep making sure I have more content. The most important thing is I have more content and better content than Joel has. So before I take off, I didn't really have a lot of questions today that I threw out to the group. Does anybody have any questions or comments to throw Amy on the chat before we close it out? Looks like we've got a good crowd. We've got over 40 on Zoom and, gosh, 20, 30 here in the training room. Oh, good God. Yeah, nobody believes that's fake news and false narrative right there. All right, listen, it's 5 o'clock, guys. I sure appreciate your time. We appreciate your leadership. And again, we'll send out this recommended book list here either today or sometime tomorrow. All right, and we'll also be sending out the link to for the recording if anybody wants to revisit this. If you've already set to this and you want to just watch it again over and over and over again, I'm sure it will be worth your time to do that. All right, nothing else for the good of the team. Everybody, I appreciate it, and we'll do this again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Stephen.